Most stories start at the beginning. This one begins at the end. After 118 years of thoroughbred racing at its present location, it all comes to a close Saturday afternoon at Northlands after the 89th renewal of the $200,000 Canadian Derby hits the wire. There will be 7 weeks of harness racing ending on October 27th, and then that's it. The doors to the Northlands track will bang shut and racing will move to the new Century Mile racetrack by the International Airport next spring. It's sad to see, said trainer Brad McKenzie, 90, who has seen it all. Northlands has been like a second home to me. Jim Thompson and I came to the track with our dads when I was 10 years old. And I never really left. I didn't like school that much, there was no action at school. Jim and I used to collect empty milk and pop bottles trying to put together $2 so we could make a bet. That was a lot of money back then. In those days, Edmonton was part of the Western Canada Racing Association, a circuit in which horses were shipped by train. There was no such thing as horse trailers, McKenzie vividly recalls. We loaded the horses on the train and went from Calgary in the spring to Edmonton, then to Winnipeg, back to Calgary for the Stampede, back to Edmonton for the exhibition, to Saskatoon, Regina, back to Edmonton, back to Calgary, and then on to Winnipeg, where we raced until late September. We were always on the move. But it was fun, you know. A lot of good memories. McKenzie, who started out as a jockey, won just about every stakes race there was, including the Derby of 1965 with Chariot Chaser, which to many longtime racing fans still stands out. A filly, Chariot Chaser, came from 21 lengths back in the mud with Sandy Shields aboard, to run down Vancouver's Weedbender. I'll never forget the roar that day. Longtime chart caller and jockey's agent Buzz Burke remembers like it was yesterday. The grandstand was shaking. It was incredible. Lots of horses came from across the country, and still do, to try to win the Derby, which began in Winnipeg in 1930 but was moved to Edmonton in 1957 when Winnipeg's Polo Park racetrack closed. The Derby and horse racing at Northlands were a big part of Edmonton's tradition and history, said Burke. It was huge. They had a Derby ball, then they had the Derby breakfast. God, it was a great time. Horse racing and bingos were the only legalized form of gambling for a long time. Horse racing was the only game in town, and they promoted the hell out of it. But once they got competition from lotteries, casinos and slot machines, they quit promoting. I never could figure that out. The money rolled at Northlands, especially in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In 1982, for example, the average daily wagering on thoroughbred racing at Northlands was $861,574. The same year, the average daily harness handle was $576,000. Million-dollar days, especially on Saturday thoroughbred cards when they were almost a given, were frequent. For years, Northlands boasted the highest per capita betting in North America. Virtually every radio station carried selections and results. The newspapers printed selections and full charts of all the races. Back then, there was no such thing as simulcast racing. And there were certainly no slot machines. Purse money was made up solely from what was bet on track. Today, however, the handle is just a couple of those days. The all-sources handle on Northlands races is now averaging $221,000. Only about $60,000 a day is being bet on Northlands races at the track itself. The betting isn't the only thing down. In the 70s, there were upwards of 1,400 thoroughbred race horses to draw from, which allowed 5- and 6-day-week racing. Now, the equine population is less than 600 and they race only 3 days a week. I loved this place, said longtime racing fan Tony Langlois, who has hardly missed a day over the last 50 years, and who remembers being 19 when he bet $2 to win on Kim's Kid in the 1971 Derby and got back $52.50. The grandstand used to be full. There were people all over the place, including the basement inner rail, which used to be the biggest bear in Edmonton, and that's when they charged $2 for admission, $3 for the clubhouse. Now, general admission is free. At its current location next to Borden Park, a new grandstand was built in 1951. There were two major upgrades in 1995 and 2005. In 1974, Northlands was converted from a half-mile track to its current 5/8 of a mile surface. Century Mile will be a mile in circumference, the only one of its kind west of Toronto. The writing was on the wall when the rug was pulled out from under Northlands when they lost the Coliseum when the new Rogers Place was built, said Scott Sinclair, Northlands Director of Racing and Gaming. Northlands Racetrack's facility is aging. We would have had to invest so much to make it right again that it wouldn't be worth it. It's like when the New York Yankees moved out of their old stadium. Racing needed a fresh start, and they will get it at Century Mile. I'm happy racing is moving to a bright future. I think it will thrive there, but for us, it's going to be a sad day.